Hello, we have some people trickling into the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Give it a little bit more time for people to come in. It gets so quiet for the webinars. I don't know why. It's all virtual. When it was in person, everyone kind of hushed, but then there's still lots of conversations going on in the background. So kind of miss that. There's actually a pitch event that I'm going to help out with next week, and it's in person, and I'm trying to remember how to actually interact with other human beings. Hopefully I haven't picked up any weird mannerisms because everything's been on Zoom. So we'll see, but I had to get my Founder Institute swag all figured out. It's like, I don't even know what to wear anymore. Shoes, got to get
business
shoes.
cards.
Business cards.
Yeah.
I don't have business cards, so I just have stickers. Yeah. I'm gonna have stickers and a shirt. So hopefully the stickers will be enough because startups love stickers.
That's true.
T-shirts, you need t-shirts.
And t-shirts, and I have a t-shirt. So anyway, thank you again for joining us. It looks like we've got our crowd. It has trickled in. Tonight's going to be a really great presentation, not just on user experience, and you may have seen that as UX or UI UX as you've been doing your startup research, but also how you can use the user experience and being customer centric, how that can help you with early stage growth to have better experience from your customer's perspective, but also how it can save you time, money, and effort when you're developing a product. And user experience is talked a lot about with software, but this conversation also applies to physical products, consumer packaged goods, all of those subscription boxes that are really popular now. User experience is fundamental to a lot of these startup business models. So I'm Diane Bailey. I am the co-director for Founder Institute, the Denver chapter. Founder Institute is the world's largest pre-seed accelerator, and we have chapters in about 225 cities across the world, and at any time about 80 to 90 of those are active. So we currently have, our founders have raised over $1 billion, and the companies are valued at over $20 billion. And so we really set the stage for early stage founders through our accelerator by giving them some structure and helping them get to traction and also have more confident conversations with investors. We do a lot with refining your pitch deck, customer discovery, all the MVP, all these terms that maybe you've heard about. We can help you not just understand the terminology, but also put it into practice into your startup. So we have applications are currently open for our next cohort that starts in August. And but it's more than just me. It's definitely a team getting Founder Institute up and going. I'd like to introduce our entrepreneur in residence, Alex Cooper.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Cooper, and I am been with Founders Institute for 2 years now. I'm an entrepreneur in residence. That means I'm an old guy that have started and sold 3 companies, all in the fintech space. And I currently work for a fintech startup based in Silicon Valley, living here in Denver. So excited to talk to you folks and hopefully help any of you that decide to bootstrap or start a new business and work with founders.
Yep. Thanks, Alex. We also have our community manager, Anthony. He's just going to wave.
Yeah.
Anthony is going to be your friend tonight. He is monitoring the chat. So as you have questions, please ask questions of Mark or questions about Founder Institute, please put them in the chat. And that helps us figure out how much time to leave for Q&A at the end, and really helps us be more interactive, because as we were just discussing, like, we can't see you. So Mark would much rather answer your questions than talk to the 3 of us. So please put your questions in the chat. Let's see, I knew there was something else I wanted to mention. Oh, yes. So we'll have Mark's presentation, we'll do Q&A, and that will take us back up to the top of the hour. And so while the formal presentation is complete at that time. We know that networking is really important, especially in the Zoom fatigue world that we are in. And so starting at the top of the hour, we are going to jump over to a platform called Airmeet, and Anthony's going to put a link in the chat. It's real easy, no software to download. It's just a link, and that will mimic the in-person networking. So Mark's going to be sitting at a virtual table. You can come sit with Mark, have some cheese and crackers, enjoy some wine, and you can ask him additional questions. And so please stay with us past the top of the hour for additional networking time. So with that, I would like to introduce Mark Tegtmeier, and he is the founder of Trailmerge. And like I said, I'm really excited about this presentation. User experience is something that is very fundamental, and it's something that a lot of people want to know about. And Mark has really deep experience with user experience. He has worked on internal projects for Home Depot. He's worked with other early stage startups, and now he has his own agency. So he has a very different perspective and lots of different perspectives on user experience and how it can apply to you. So take it away, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Diane. Hey, everybody. It's great to be here. And, you know, Founder Institute is doing awesome things. We've known Diane for a number of years now. Not that long, but, you know, no, but she's awesome. She's doing amazing things for the startup community. So it's such an honor and privilege to be here. So I'm gonna jump in here and share with y'all. So we're gonna be talking about user experience and how it can help you grow your startup. But first, I'll give a little bit about myself. So I was actually a Spanish major in college, and then, you know, coming out of college was kind of, you know, trying to figure out what to do in terms of actually making money, because apparently people don't just pay you just because you're bilingual. So one of the things, you know, I got into pretty early on was a branding agency up in Bend, Oregon. I really enjoyed my time there. I was doing more business development. It was kind of, you know, always interested in design before that. You know, I remember just sketching little logos and stuff like that in high school, and doing little you know, makeshift flyers. And but, you know, got into that, loved the world of branding, marketing, design, but also saw the startup community in Oregon, where I was at the time, and the innovation that was happening, just all the, you know, exciting growth and business strategy side of things. And as those two parts of me kind of collided, that's what took me into UX design. So, you know, spent some time in Colorado doing UX related jobs, and got some really fun opportunities kind of along the way. And you know, now, as Diane mentioned, in Atlanta, came out here for Home Depot, and am now working with Trailmerge. So we get to work with you know, various SaaS companies, helping them out with their UX. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of stuff to work on, that a lot of interesting ideas and products, and you get to see things grow. So it's a lot of fun. But we'll get into basics of UX. So when I tell people about UX and what I do, there's a lot of blank stares a lot of times. UX is often, yeah, it's known in a little circle. So I try to explain to people, and there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different things about it, and there's a lot of kind of preconceived notions. So I'll go to, this is Don Norman here. He's one of the godfathers, him and Jacob Nielsen, they're kind of the godfathers of the UX industry or profession. And they say user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. So as Diane mentioned, it is not necessarily a software related discipline. It is very often that, but user experience processes and the way of thinking, and really kind of that bigger picture practice is applicable to a lot of different industries. I thought I'd try my stab at a definition of UX design as well. So it is the practice of crafting a product and or service in a way that centralizes people's interaction with and perception of said product or service. So what does that mean? Well, for one, it is, there's a difference between being able to design and being able to influence somebody's experience, right? So experience is something that's very personal. It's the perception of the world outside of you. It's how you interact with it. So in some ways you can't exactly design an experience, but you can design the things that somebody interacts with. There are things that you can control about it. There's things that you can't. One of those things that you can control is the actual product itself. Does it work? Does it break down? Does it make sense? Is it learnable? And does it fit with your users' mental patterns, behaviors that you're used to, things like that. So one of the things with that, UX is not just UI. So that's one of the kind of preconceptions a lot of times that you get when you say, I'm a UX designer. Oh, you make things pretty. Well, I like to think so, but that's really not the main focus of what UX is all about. UX is a lot more about usability. It's a lot more about adoption of a product and providing a good overall experience. So aesthetics and look and feel is absolutely a part of it, but it is just that. It's just a part of it. So good UX really is all about putting your users first, thinking about them as you create your product or as you develop out your service. These are a couple of the really foundational components of UX. Research is a big part of it. So it's the upfront research to really understand your users, the people who use your product, who use your service, your customers. Customers and users are not always the same people. Sometimes you have your customer is the leader of this department, and the users are all the people who report to the person who reports to this person. So there's not always a direct connection there, but UX is really focused on those end users. So research is really to understand, who are these people? where are they coming from? What are they expecting? What's going to make their life easier and better? And then the other side being the UI design and the interaction design. So when I'm saying UI here, I'm saying it in broad terms. So UI is typically thought of as your user interface, meaning what shows up on the screen, what's the visual. But UIs could also be, they could also be an audio interface. So you think about Alexa or Google Home or something like that. The voice interaction is actually the UI in that case. So it's not necessarily a screen. All right, this is Brian Chesky of Airbnb. Like what he has to say, they are a prime example of a design-led startup. We start with the perfect experience and then work backward. That's how we're going to continue to be successful. So they're thinking about what is the experience that our users are going to have. They are actually combining the experience both of actually using the Airbnb platform, but they're also thinking about what is the actual guest experience or the host experience. What are the interactions like, between the guest and the host outside of the platform, and thinking about how they can enhance that experience, influence that experience for the better. So when people talk to me about UX, when they're asking me what exactly is it that you do, I often give the analogy of architecture. So you wouldn't go and decide to build a skyscraper and just bring in the construction crew and say, okay, guys, get to work, right? You're going to bring an architect in beforehand. architect's going to think about the purpose of the building. They're going to think about the purpose of different rooms in that building, how people get in, how people get out, what happens in an error or when it's not the the happy path as we call it. What happens if there's a fire? Are there things in place to make sure that everybody's safe? What about accessibility? How are we taking care of different people's needs in terms of being able to access the building and navigate around the building? So UX, you can apply that to essentially the digital world. That's what I do as being in the software world. But of course, some of the same principles apply to service-based businesses as well. All right, so why UX? Well, one of the core reasons, I mean, it's really about building a happy customer base and a happy user base. So that can obviously influence your growth. You have people talking about your product, they're enthusiastic about it, they're sharing it with their friends. Adoption is the other side of the coin. So you have people come in, start using your application. Instead of getting a bunch of people in, you have a great marketing message that is reaching your potential customers. They're saying, yes, this seems like it really solves my pain point, but then they log in for the first time and, oh man, is this difficult to use or what? I don't even get it. It seemed like it had so much promise, but it's just so hard. I'm bailing, right? So it can actually help with kind of that long-term adoption and building a product that people are actually going to use longer term, tell other people about, and be excited about. So another thing here is really when we're in the startup world, we are all about learning, right? So is the quickest path to learning just building something? Is that the least expensive path of learning? Sometimes, maybe, but there can be steps along the way. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about iteration, but design can be one step to quicker learnings and making sure that learning is actually a little bit more reliable. So, when you're conducting, say, a science experiment, you're trying to control for variables. So that same scenario where you have somebody coming in, you're getting all these downloads from the App Store or whatever it might be, but they're leaving. Are they leaving because it wasn't a good product market fit, or are they leaving because it wasn't a good experience? If you're just seeing that data and taking it as, well, the product market fit wasn't there, I guess this wasn't a great idea. Well, that might not be the case. It might have to do with how the experience was designed. Of course, differentiation. We're thinking about the SaaS market. Of course, this could apply across the board, but SaaS in particular is growing like crazy. And so a lot of times you have multiple SaaS platforms in a very similar space, going after the same market, going after it with pretty similar features. So the experience itself, in that case, really needs to be the differentiator. This is another thing I see with very early stage startups going kind of straight to the developers saying, hey, I have this kind of back of the napkin idea. It's a great concept. Here, how long is it going to take for you to build this? Well, if a developer is being honest with you, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about, well, what exactly does this look like? What should it do? How are people going to interact with it? What kind of data should it be built on top of? So developers really need those requirements. So actually doing the work to design it beforehand, and especially if you're involving your customers, involving potential users in that process, not only are you going to kind of save on the overall cost, but you're also going to have a little bit more direction as you're building out your application. Prioritization, that's another piece. You're doing the research, you're talking to your users frequently about specific things in your application, not just about kind of general product market fit type questions. You're going to be able to prioritize your features with kind of a more informed perspective. And then finally, design debt. This is a longer term thing. So, a lot of times when you're earlier on, you're not necessarily thinking about this, but, over time, I've seen companies who have, built a product over time, not really involved a strong design process. And, of course, then your support team is having to help out a lot. Your users are having a hard time onboarding themselves. And there's the big cost of having to rebuild everything with a big redesign to make it more user-friendly of an experience. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the process. We'll get to a few things that you can apply right out the gate and implement into your process as you build your product. So this is one of the things that I taught at General Assembly career changers who are getting into UX design. This is one of the kind of key images that we always go back to in the course. It's not entirely accurate, but it gives you a really good overview of what kind of the overall process is. So these are called diverging and converging diamonds. The double diamond process is it's often called. But really what we're looking at the center, that's the UX role. A little bit beforehand, you have your product team, you have your sales team getting involved, marketing, even your customer success or executive leadership, things like that. Obviously, in a earlier stage company, a lot of this, the whole process is done by a couple of founders, but that's really where you're thinking about like the business kind of side of things. Where's the product market fit? What's the next thing that we need to build so we can really effectively sell to this particular market that we're going after? But then there's kind of a shift from this customer discovery, product market fit type research to what I would call more of UX research, which is you're starting to do more interviews around a particular feature set. It's very focused on both what people are used to, what tools they're currently using, how they're solving this particular problem currently, and what kind of technologies they're used to, things like that are going to ultimately inform the details of the design. So initially you're looking at more what should we build, then you're looking at how should we build it based off of that next step of research. So as you're researching, you're getting all sorts of ideas. You're getting a ton of information. You're getting, that's where the diamond is starting to diverge. You're getting all this information. It's great. You get tons of ideas, but then you have to figure out, okay, what is it that we're going to focus on specifically now? So that's really where this process of synthesizing research. So basically, you're looking for themes in the research. It's really that simple. And you're choosing a problem to really focus on, maybe a particular feature or version 1 that you can think of and start to actually build out. So nothing has been put into pixel form at this stage of the game or put on paper, except for just feedback. So next, you're getting in the design phase. You're thinking about basically, what does this flow look like? How do people go through this building, essentially? The information architecture, that's talking about the hierarchy of information within your application, the navigation. How do people get from one step to the other based on how everything is organized? Ideation and sketches is super important. This is that low fidelity meaning it's not like it's going to end up. It's sketched out. It's simple. It's wireframes. At this point in the game, you're really just trying to get ideas out there. Again, you're diverging. The diamond's going like this, and then it goes back like this because you start to settle on ideas. You make them higher fidelity. So you make them look very similar to what they're going to do. You're doing usability testing. You're getting it more and more refined and ready for development, and then supporting development as they go along their way. So this is an example of wireframes that we've done for one of our clients. So you can see it's a lot more simple. This is essentially the flows that we're talking about. So creating a new user, what happens in terms of managing different users on the platform, and what they have access to, how they create within this platform. And then this is an example zoomed out of more of the high fidelity mockup. So this is very similar to what it looks like in real life. You have all these little blue, bright blue things, and those are notes to developers talking about the specific things that what should happen when this gets clicked, what should happen when this gets gets started, this process, or whatever it might be. So when you're thinking about your particular place in the process, it really depends. And the process where I say it isn't entirely accurate is sometimes you need to bounce back and forth. And it really depends on what your specific needs are. Sometimes you're going to need to go back to sketching, just throw all the mock-ups in the trash bin because something is just not working either technically or it's just not resonating with your users in usability testing. Sometimes you just got to go back to research, or sometimes maybe you just got to try building something and then put it in front of users in a usability test rather than continue doing kind of initial stages of research. But depending on where you're at, it could bounce around a little bit. All right, so I'd like to give you just kind of some real simple tips. Some of them, require a little bit more work than others, but these are really kind of the foundations of building a good user experience for your product or service. So first thing, know your user, and no, it's not about you. Sorry. So this is another very common thing that I've seen is that you get into building something. Let's say, of course, my world is SaaS. So you are very familiar with the industry. You know that this is a problem because you've seen this problem every single day of your work life. But then you start to build something and you're either having difficulty prioritizing thing or you're kind of like going off on these like wish list rabbit trails. It's painful, and it can end up spending a lot of time and money on things that people are not going to ultimately buy for. So having a very clear understanding of who your users are and getting a good representative sample of users that you're talking to is super important. All right, this is something I've heard several years ago, but I really like this one. Design a product a few people love, not one that a lot of people like. So this is another thing we go for, like, I want to be all things to all people. I want everybody to like me, all that kind of stuff. But this is called the Net Promoter Score. So you've probably seen this around the internet, all sorts of places, and it just pops up and bugs you and wants you to take this the survey. But essentially here you are ranking your level of how much you like something, how much you're willing to recommend it to your friends and families on a 0 to 10 scale. Now, according to the NPS results, the 0 to 6 is considered a detractor. So in other words, that means that if you are giving a 6 on this survey, you are likely to be bad-mouthing this service or this product to other people. If you are a 7 or 8, you're just kind of whatever. You're not really saying anything bad. You're not really saying anything good. You're just kind of there. And it's your 9s and your 10s. I mean, there's just 2 numbers out of this whole scale. Those 2 numbers are really the people who are excited about it, who are telling their friends about it, who are like, hey, you got to buy this. This really helped me out so much. Think about that really good software purchase that you made last. And it might be pretty few and far between, but there's been those times where you're like, oh, you got to try this out. This is awesome. That's you being a promoter. That's who you really want to design for, especially early on in the life cycle of your company, because those are the ones that are going to be really spreading your product. But they're also going to be, they're going to have very specific needs, and if you meet them well, there's a loyalty factor there as well. Ask the right questions. This is super important for research. This can be applied to anywhere in the customer discovery phase, definitely to UX research as well. So here's some examples of really bad questions to ask. Do you like my idea? Or what about, isn't this great? Yeah, no, you're going to be getting like nice answers, but people are going to be lying to you. So there's this little book called The Mom Test. Check it out. That's kind of the premise of it is people like to be liked, and we don't really want to offend other people. So if you come to me and you say, hey, do you like this? I'm going to try to make you not feel bad because I don't want to be that jerk who's just like super blunt. But might not be entirely honest about this idea, and yeah, I definitely wouldn't buy it, that's for sure. Would you use this? Or if we did this, if we added this feature, what about if we changed this? Then would you buy it? Would you download it? Would you use it? Would you come to the store? Those are not great questions to ask. Why? Because they're speculative. You're just thinking about potentially in the future, you might do this. And if somebody says yes, like they don't know. Let's be honest. Like you say, if we had this new feature in 6 months, would you do whatever? I don't really know. It's 6 months from now. There's so many things that could happen in that time. So much more reliable using open-ended questions. How do you feel about this idea? Instead of asking, do you like this? Yes or no. Yes or no questions are usually going to be leading, so they're good to avoid. But how do you feel about this idea? That gives a little bit more open room to respond to this. Yeah, I think there's some great value to it, but at the same time, I just can't see myself using it, that kind of thing. That question you probably have to be a little bit cautious with still, because you could still get some of that, like, I don't want to offend you. But what have you used in the last year? You're trying to uncover behaviors. These are things that have already happened. They're historical fact. They're not speculation. Who, when, where, all the W questions and how, all good questions to be asking. On a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to, or on a scale of 1 to 5, how confusing was this process for you? That's a really good usability follow-up question. Or on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident did you feel that you completed this task successfully? That's one of the ones that we've used. Clarifying questions. So this is part of active listening skills. So as you are researching, active listening, super important. You're not just jotting down information saying, oh, that's great, awesome, thanks. You're actually following up with questions, and that's where a lot of the really great information comes from, is in those informed follow-up questions. And why is a really great example of a follow-up question. All right, jobs to be done. This kind of goes along with asking questions. It's a way of thinking about your users, about why they are coming to you. What are they trying to accomplish? So there's, I think, a few components to this. The whole concept of jobs to be done, kind of the common analogy is people don't buy a drill, they buy a 1/4-inch hole. So there's a reason that they're buying the drill. It's not just because they're drill collectors. So you're thinking about what are these things that somebody's trying to accomplish. It's not necessarily a work-related task, even though it's called a job to be done. It could be, the job could be, I want to entertain myself, or I want to pass some time when I'm waiting at a bus stop or something like that, right? That's still a job that somebody is trying to do, something that they're trying to accomplish. So these 5 points are really kind of the framework around thinking about that job in particular. And this can help inform you in terms of building features or the product as a whole, really. So context, who is doing this? What is their role? Where are they? What kind of, if it's a B2B type platform, what is their role within the company, or where do they fit in this like department map kind of situation? Motivations, why are they doing it? Why is this important to them? Is this like, is it something they're looking for promotion? Are they trying to just do their job? Are they, what is it? Behaviors, what are they doing to scratch this itch right now? So that kind of goes back to what is the historical data that you can point back to and see, well, maybe they won't go for like this kind of app because, we're charging, tons of money on an annual basis for this thing. It's super specialized and all this kind of stuff. And in the past, they've only like tried these different free options. This is really something that we want to pursue, right? You can look back to that historical data. Pain points. What are some of the areas of opportunity that you can help fix, help alleviate? And then of course, definition of success. What does it mean to actually accomplish this task for them? What does that look like? How do they gauge whether or not it's been a win for them? All right, keeping the feedback cycle tight. So this is, learning is really the name of the game when you're a startup. It's all about going back to the user. So this could be through, continuing interviews. This could be through usability testing. That's awesome. Always going back to your users with new designs, hearing them out. It's easy to kind of have this idea and be like, oh, I love this idea. I made this design. It's very nice. But actually letting users critique you and taking that input and making those changes, it takes a little discipline, but very much worth it. Starting lo-fi, I've mentioned this a couple times, but this is all about iterating when the cost is low and designed at. So if you look at this graph, at the beginning here, there's just a couple of people involved. And this is, this is a little bit further down the line when you have a little bit more of a team. But you're thinking about who's involved and how much time is involved in creating those initial, research, or the initial requirements, the initial research findings, the initial wireframe sketches, things like that, right? You're pretty low down here. As soon as you start getting into mockups, it starts getting a little bit higher, and you're putting more and more definition around something, and then you get into development and it just starts going way up. The cost to actually change what this design is going to be looking like, because at that point, as soon as it's developed, it's a full redesign. So making these changes along the way, because you're getting user feedback early on, is going to make sure that you have something really solid once you get to development. Using a design system. Now, this is something that a corporation like Home Depot, they're going to have like a dedicated team and doing investing a good amount into a design system. So this could be super large scale, but it could also be super scrappy. So these are some examples of just components from design systems that for companies that we've worked with. It's things like just the colors, the iconography, UI components. This can be in like a physical space as well. I was talking to somebody about a month or two ago who was doing architecture for WeWork, and she essentially had a design system in the physical space that was used kind of throughout WeWork properties. So it can be something that is in several different contexts, but this is basically building consistency. It's interaction patterns. So it's, if I do this with a button that kind of looks like this, or if I do XYZ with this icon, it should always have a very similar effect, right? So that helps me to learn the platform, that helps me to adopt the platform, that helps me to get going. It can also help just the build if you are building in terms of, there's a good book that's all online, 5 fairly short chapters called Atomic Design. Definitely would encourage you to check it out if you're looking into design systems, how it can help you build faster. So emphasize learnability. This kind of goes into some of the design system stuff, but it's also just about guidance, providing guidance. So this is a really good example from Asana. When you start a new board in Asana, they give you a few things here, just little hints, right? They're not printing out a manual for you. They're not giving you all these instructions, but just this one little task here, it shows you this is what's going to happen if you add a task. It's going to pop up here like this. They have some examples here of columns. So you're not just starting from scratch and having to figure it all out. They're giving you a little visual clue. So anywhere that you can implement something like that along the way, super helpful for adoption. Prevent errors before they happen. This is another one of those things. So, you know, being now, you know, working with, you know, in a couple different states, there's those different state forms and stuff that you have to fill out for hiring and all that kind of stuff. And you're like going through the super long form, and at the end, it's like not going through because there's some error like way up on the very top of the page, and you have to kind of poke around to find it. I'm sure we've all had a similar experience. So better than even showing an error to begin with, there are some things that you can do, just real little things that you can do to prevent them from ever happening to begin with. So field validation, this is, you know, you're taking a phone number, right? You're gonna not allow somebody to enter letters or random characters or things like that. It's just gonna be numbers, right? That's one little thing that you can do to prevent errors along the way. And then lastly, humanize your users. So design for people. And unfortunately, the world is full of examples to the contrary. So, you know, one of the things, just always remember that there's people on the other side of what you're building. So doing this kind of stuff where you're like, yeah, you have 2 options. Yes, I want this offer, or no, I don't like savings. Yeah, that's a little passive aggressive of you. So yeah, let's create products that help honor and respect people. That's always a good thing, and people appreciate that. So next steps, we'll wrap up with this. Just think about where you're at now. Take inventory of your current design, of what the experience is like for people who you are trying to serve. Think about what that ideal experience is. Take those steps back. You know, you're not going to be able to get to ideal right away, but you can start to learn this process, implement this process, do the research, do the design, you know, do iterations, make that feedback cycle nice and tight. And, you know, from there, you have information that you can figure out. What should I do now? What should I do next? What should I do in the future? So in terms of learning, we have some stuff on our blog. I would definitely encourage you, you know, especially at this early stage in your startups, to check out this post that we did a little bit ago about design debt. One of the things that we do at Trailmerge is we do these design audits. So if you do have a SaaS platform, you're looking for kind of help with that initial, like, what do I do? Where am I right now in terms of my UX? What is my experience like for end users? And what are some of those like quick wins that that we can just take care of right away? What is some of the strategy that we can do moving forward? Definitely check this out. So you can see us there, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
See if you want to close out of your screen there so everyone can see our faces all nice and big. Yes, put your questions in the chat, and also just even tell us a little bit about your startup or what project you're working on, and maybe we can do some brainstorming. Also keep in mind at the top of the hour, we're going to jump over to Airmeet, which is the virtual networking platform where you can sit at a virtual table with Mark and ask him more questions directly. So as people are asking questions, so I have a few questions, and these are some things that we've talked about before. One of the current trending strategies for gaining users has been product-led growth, and that's using the product itself to not only gain new users and go viral, but also to convert those freemium users into paid users. Can you explain how user experience is, how that interfaces with the product-led growth movement?
Yeah, definitely. So product-led growth, one of the keys to really allowing your product to take the lead is something that I like to call time to value. So at what point is your user going to understand that this is really a valuable tool for them? So there's a few things that need to kind of fall into this process of time to value. You have learnability is huge for this, right? So much of product-led growth is focusing on as much self-service as possible. So if it is difficult to use, it will be difficult to really amp up that level of growth that you're looking for. And really so much of converting from a freemium to paid user, any of those things of maybe going from a proof of concept to a longer term contract, things like that. So much of it just has to do with, do I understand that this is useful for me? And the way that I come to understand it is by being able to use it and see it apply to my current needs. It's been easy to learn, it's been easy to pick up, and it's been easy to use.
Anthony, it looks like we've got some questions, some audience questions.
Our first question is just, what was the name of your design developing tool again? Give us one more plug.
What was that one?
What's your design developing tool? I'm not quite sure what that.
Design developing tool. I'm guessing that's meaning the platform that we use for design. So we use Figma. I really like Figma. I've used Adobe XD. I've used Sketch and InVision. Figma is pretty solid, and it's great for kind of the dev interaction as well. So I really like the collaborative aspect of it as well. So that's my little plug.
And the next question is, if you were to farm out UX design, how much would that cost you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that really depends on what you mean by farming out. So I think there's a kind of a spectrum between agency, which I kind of hesitate to call Trailmerge an agency because a lot of times I do call it an agency, but typically that connotation is kind of short-term, high cost type situation, right? You're trying to just get a project done with. On the other hand, you have staffing where essentially you're bringing on a full-time person, but it's through a staffing agency, and typically you're going to be paying kind of like a full-time employee at that point. Trailmerge is kind of an in-between, where it's more of an embedded team. It still acts in some ways as an agency in some way, but more of a long-term type thing. So it really kind of depends, exactly what you're looking for in terms of deliverable. But
oh, and Anthony, before we go on to a next question, we are recording the event tonight. So if you would like a recording of this event, just change in the chat the two, instead of two panelists and attendees, just change it to all panelists, and send us your email, and then I will send you the replay when it's ready. So anyway.
Yeah, our next question is from Jennifer. It seems like with so many apps available, the user tolerance for any type of issue seems to be very low. So the world of finding MVP seems to be changing as well. What are a few key non-negotiables you have of when it comes to launching a new mobile app?
That is
So
that's a really good
non-negotiables.
question. Yeah, non-negotiables. It should work. That's one. And that seems like a really kind of low baseline, but it's not always the case. So I do think that there's an aspect where gone are the days of like put it out where it's like, if you put it out and you're not embarrassed by it, it's too late. I think that's, I don't necessarily think that that's quite where we are anymore. Simply because, if you're putting out the world's first of something, that's great. But at this point in the game, I think so many apps are more like, we're doing this, but we're doing it a lot better. So at that point, you have to really figure out what is it going to be that's going to validate this idea that yes, you are in fact doing it better. So I think it can depend on your market. Some markets are going to have more of a tolerance, especially if it's an industry that has been using tools made in the early 2000s for a long time. But if you're talking about consumer mobile, you probably really want to have your UX very tight.
And what if you screw up your initial launch with your UX? How do you recover?
I didn't hear the first
Sorry,
part.
I said
your initial launch.
Yeah, I said if you screw up your UX, what do you do what are your steps to fix that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is if you have a platform already, right? You have to, I guess, mainly understand what are the key areas that are causing your users troubles right now, right? When we do these design audits, we're ranking different areas. We use standard usability standards. They're called heuristics. But essentially, we're looking at things on a 1 to 5 scale. So 1 would be, yes, it kind of doesn't really look great. It's kind of annoying, that kind of a thing. 5 would be like, I can't do what I'm trying to do. I keep getting blocked, right? So think about the issues that your app has on that scale and handle the 5s and the 4s first.
While we wait for a few more questions to come in and/or emails for the recording replay, how do I know as a founder that I have nailed it with my UX? Is it what is I mean, NPS is great, but that's just one number. Can you speak to the quantitative and qualitative ways that someone knows that their UX is spot on?
Yeah, I would say you have to have a definition of done, right? At any stage of the game. But I like to think of it in terms of usability tests are great because you can, industry best practice is 3 to 5 users going through a particular flow of tasks. We'll be able to find, let's say, 80% of the issues, right? So if you can find those 80% of the issues, or maybe go through that process even a couple times, 2-3 times before you get to development, you're going to find a lot of issues and be at a point where you can say, yeah, I really think just based off of what we've heard, the first 2 usability tests, let's say we got feedback on this. The third usability test, we got great feedback. We didn't really have any sort of major issues, things like that. I think it's time to go to development, right? It's never going to be fully perfect. You're never going to fully get rid of any design debt where you have none. It's really about kind of the 80-20 rule, right?
So you're saying there's job security there for you?
Well,
Looks like we've got one more question. Oh, there's Anthony. And then we'll jump over to Airmeet.
Another great question from Jennifer. How do you incorporate a solid blend when designing for iPhone versus Android users? Sounds like we have someone developing an app.
Yeah. I'm guessing this is having to do with how native do you make your design, and if you're doing one build, we're going to try to kind of do that. Well, I think there are things that you can get away with going a little bit more one direction or the other, or even kind of go with your own design system. When we were at Home Depot, or when I was at Home Depot, we had a team that I was a part of that was putting together kind of a mobile design system. And this was one of those constant debates between several designers in this group was, are we going to go like full native, which really wasn't practical because, a lot of these apps are built with web technologies and you're building them once and all that kind of stuff. Or are we going to go, full agnostic? It's also not entirely practical. So I think if you're going for an initial build that is going to be for both platforms, really study both sets of guidelines, your human interface guidelines and your material guidelines, and find where they align, find where they don't align so much, and see if you can find some compromises.
Awesome.
Diane, I have a comment.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, my engineering and UI UX days are long gone, but what I find interesting about the discussion is that these same principles of good UI UX really apply to so many things for an entrepreneur in terms of you got to know who your customer is. You have to develop a persona. You have to do marketing, A/B testing. You have to, in the sales process, again, keep checking back with your customer. Do they, are you communicating? Do they understand your value prop? What do they really think? All these principles, again, you got to build a good product that customers can use, but the same principles apply to everything related to interacting with your customer and knowing who they are when you're out there trying to build a product, sell it, and market it.
Yeah, definitely. I think a big thing is it's so much is about listening, right? Sales is about listening, active listening. Are you really hearing people? Same with design.
Yep.
Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you, Mark, for your time tonight. This was great and a really good overview of UX. And I think also at the end, just the low-hanging fruit takeaways that we can do to improve our products. And again, it's not just for software, it's really for all kinds of products. And as Alex mentioned, it applies to so many different facets as you as a founder, as in terms of communication, in terms of relaying your value props, so many things. It looks like we have one last question. Maybe we do that really quick in the last 30 seconds or so. And then Anthony posted the link for Airmeet. And so just click on that link. It'll say Founder Institute on there, and then jump in. It won't say anything specific about this event, but I promise you're in the right spot. Just click on the link to go into the room. It will say you can do speed networking or sit at a table. I would recommend sitting at a table. Mark will be sitting at a table and he will be joining you shortly. I will be joining you, and Anthony and Alex if they have a moment as well. So we'll see you on the other side. Mark, if you want to answer this last question, Anthony?
Yeah. Can I get end user feedback during the interview stage? How efficient is that?
Yeah, I would say that interview really is all about getting that end user feedback. It might be, if you're talking about kind of these initial user interviews before you go into the design itself. Absolutely. I mean, you can get that based off of requirements. Definitely. I would definitely make those questions as open-ended as you possibly can, though. So, I would caution against just saying like, oh, here, we have this requirement, this requirement, this requirement. These are our plans, this is our roadmap, this is what we're going to be doing. What do you think, right? That kind of goes back into that kind of leading questions or the mom test type situation. So, I definitely encourage, especially at those very early on stage, be ready to just crumple up your entire sheet of requirements and throw it in the trash.
What a way to end the presentation. There we go. All right. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope to see you over on Airmeet, and have a wonderful evening. And again, if you have questions on Founder Institute, or if you just want to chat startups, I like chatting about startups. I want to know what you're doing or what resources I can point you in the right direction. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Just let me know that you were at this presentation so I can make sure I accept your friend request, and happy to chat with you. So anyway, have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks.